Well, the doubleheader in Austria for Formula One is over. Alexis Nunes here with Nate Saunders. He's not quite buzzing as much as he was last weekend, Nate, but this weekend, normalcy kind of returned. Lewis Hamilton once again and Mercedes doing 1 and 2. But let's start off with Ferrari because I said it, I had tweeted it. I said, boy, when it rains for Ferrari, it pours. And Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc know that all too well after today, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you take Charles Leclerc's podium away last weekend, which obviously came about from
as a shock.
Yeah, they have had an awful back-to-back weekend, and that really is the only silver lining you can take from it. And this, like you say, when it rains, it pours, because they had a terrible day yesterday. The rain should have taken away some of that weakness that we know they have in straight line speed. We know the engine this year is a big issue for them. And that is mitigated in the rain, and they still were 10th and 11th in qualifying. Leclerc got a 3-place grid penalty, so he moved further down. And then on the run-up to turn 3, they were even further back in the pack, so both had a pretty slow start. Horrendously clumsy move from Leclerc, going into Vettel. He owned up to it afterwards, which maybe makes the post-race debrief a little less awkward, but they're still going to be talking about the same thing of how both of them crashed out of this race. They weren't able to test the upgrades that they had forced through for this race. They were meant to be bringing them next week. So yeah, just there's no real positive to put on it in any way for Ferrari. And if you're a Ferrari fan, and you maybe thought we were being harsh on them last week, we weren't at all. They're in for such a bad season, and with these races coming thick and fast now as well, it's hard to see them making big steps forward. I think Hungary should be a better circuit for them, but they just look like a midfield team right now. So they'll be in there with Racing Point and McLaren, I think, all season, and that's Ferrari we're talking about.
Exactly.
It's just not. Yeah, it's a bit, you're a Manchester United fan. It's a bit like how Manchester United has been talked about for a long time. A great team that is struggling.
We are a mid-table team.
Yeah, exactly. So,
but it hurts to say it.
But it's not befitting of a team of Ferrari stature. And I think we could be witnessing their worst season of the modern era. That's certainly what it feels like right now.
Ooh, there's our headline right there. But let's talk about Mercedes now. Like I said, it's back. And I always say this because there's few people in this world that seem to bounce back like Lewis Hamilton. You guys did say it in our podcast like weekend, and you said, this 4th place finish is going to absolutely spur him. Other people would celebrate 4th place, not Lewis. And I mean, he was never really tested, was he?
Not really. And to be honest, he laid the foundations down for this on Saturday.
Yeah.
One of his best laps that we've ever seen. In the rain, conditions he absolutely loves. He was 1.2 seconds ahead of Verstappen, which, as you're starting to appreciate now in Formula One, is an absolute country
miles
ahead of everyone else.
Wet weather god is what Lawrence called him.
Exactly, and that reputation is founded for a reason. And once he put himself on pole, Mercedes, I think, had the edge over Red Bull. And once he got into turn 1 ahead, barring any issues with the car or any mistake, which we know he doesn't make that often, it looked like his race to lose. Bottas was ahead because of going longer in his first stint, which helped him get second and keep the championship lead. But yeah, Lewis looked fantastic all weekend, and that's the Lewis that Bottas has to beat. We all talked about Bottas last week, and he won this race, but he beat Lewis, who kind of kept stuttering and having these little mistakes. This is the Lewis that Bottas has to beat this season, and he was quite a long way shy of doing that on both days. So that's really the benchmark for the season. And as you say, Lewis just keeps bouncing back. He has a bad weekend once every blue moon. And then, we might now have 4 or 5 races where he's just at the top of his game. So it's why he's got the records he does. It's why he's got the wins he's got, why he's got the championships he's got. And yeah, I mean, it must be so demoralising for everyone else, because you're like, come on, guys, give us a break. Like, let's see 2 back-to-back bad weekends from you instead of just the one. So great race from him. And Bottas still leads the championship. But again, that's the sort of thing Lewis looks at. And it just spurs him on even more for Hungary. So solid weekend from him.
2 back-to-back weekends for Lewis Hamilton. That would imply that he's human, Nate, and we all know Lewis is not. But let's talk about, of course, when things go back to normal for the top teams and at the top of the table. It's the battle of the midfield that always gets us exciting. And our boy Lando Norris, once again, with a stunning finish right there with the 2 Racing Point cars. And I mean, that was... I can't even comprehend it. You put it into words for me.
Well, it was amazing, and Lando really was nowhere for most of the race. He was he was not nowhere, but he was further back down the order. Wasn't really having the sort of race which makes headlines.
We almost thought it would have been Carlos's kind of weekend, especially with the way things went in qualifying.
100%. Carlos had a great Saturday and looked like the quicker of the 2 McLarens. Lando actually, it sounded pretty painful. He was dealing with some rib issues on Friday, which he wasn't really sure where those had come from. But through the high-speed
from the hug
corners,
from Zach Brown last week.
That's what everyone's saying. Everyone's saying it was Zach Brown's fault, and McLaren strangely haven't addressed those rumours. They've laughed them off. But whatever it was obviously giving him some discomfort. He got himself a grid penalty in Friday practice as well, which he was really annoyed with himself about. And yeah, I think the race he said he was saving the tyres in the first stint, and the race came to him in that second stint. And what's great with this performance and last weekend as well is it shows a huge amount of maturity to have put himself in that position. On the penultimate lap, he and Stroll had a really great fight.
Yeah.
Stroll, to his credit, a lot of people like to downplay Stroll, but I think he did really well in that fight to kind of keep it clean. Lando saw he was defeated on that occasion and then set himself up for the move on the final lap, and then was able to get Perez, who nearly got past Albon, probably deserved fourth place given his race, and then ended up dropping back to fifth. And I'm pretty sure, dropping back to sixth. And I'm pretty sure all four of those guys, Norris, Perez, Stroll, Ricciardo, crossed within a second of each other. Crazy at the end. And like you say, the midfield battle just keeps on getting better and better. And Lando at the moment is the star of that midfield. He leaves the Red Bull ring with his reputation so enhanced. So it's great to see. And I think, given that he's done this twice in a row, it's fair to say that we've seen a real step forward from him this season. Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating now is how does Sainz respond to this? I think Sainz probably didn't have the race he wanted to have. But yeah, it shows you McLaren is really on a good place, and Lando's the guy driving that at the moment. When last year, you could have said it was Sainz doing that. So yeah, great to see. And we're going to have to come up with a name for Lando. We've got Sunday
I was going to say, what would we call him? Sunday?
Or Last Lap Lando.
So there is.
I've got to confess, I came up with that earlier. That wasn't spur of the moment. But I think that for these two races, that works.
Last Lap Lando.
Last Lap Lando and Sunday Sainz at McLaren. Dream team.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.